I'm Maya. My parents suspended me from home until I apologized to my sister. I just said, all right. The next morning, I was gone. 4 years later, they're begging me to come back from the tiny rented duplex they barely afford. If you were suspended from your own home for refusing to play the role they wrote for you, what would you have done? And as you listen to my story, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? I grew up in a house that, from the outside, looked like the blueprint of a perfect American family. My parents were the couple everyone pointed to when talking about healthy parenting. They were both licensed therapists, co-founders of the Restored Hearts Family Center, a glossy little clinic with soft lighting, inspirational quotes on the walls, and monthly workshops titled things like Raising Emotionally Balanced Children and Loving Without Favoritism. On social media, they were minor celebrities posting reels about boundaries, gentle parenting, healing your inner child, the whole curated wellness aesthetic. They spoke like they'd invented compassion. They branded themselves as the couple who saves fractured families. And maybe they did save some, just never their own. Inside that house, the truth was smaller, louder, and far less flattering. They had 2 daughters, me, Maya, and my younger sister, Bella. I was 17 when everything fell apart. She was 15, already treated like a delicate flower carved from crystal, fragile, precious, untouchable. Bella was the sensitive one, the artist, the soul of the family. She painted soft watercolors of sunsets and recorded piano covers my parents posted online with captions like, "Our little prodigy spreading beauty again." She twirled through ballet recitals while my parents live-streamed every moment, narrating proudly as if they were discovering the next Misty Copeland. Teachers called her kind and dreamy. My parents called her extraordinary. They said she needed more support because she felt the world more deeply than others. And then there was me, the practical one, the strong one, the daughter who doesn't need as much attention. My father loved saying that. Maya's independent. He'd explain to friends. She's sturdy. Bella's the one who bruises easily. Sturdy. That was my label. Useful when they needed chores done. A babysitter for Bella. Or someone to hold the camera during her performances. But somehow disqualifying when I wanted anything for myself. I remember the day I asked if I could join the robotics club. They were building a small drone, and I'd spent weeks staring at the flyer taped to the school library door. I rehearsed asking them. I waited until Dad finished recording a video about supporting your child's curiosity. I walked into the kitchen hopeful, telling them I wanted to try something new. Dad didn't even look up from his laptop. Electronics are expensive. Maya, you should focus on schoolwork. When you get a job one day, you can buy all the gadgets you want. Then he waved me off. Go help your sister with her costume for her recital. Bella walked in minutes later and announced she wanted to take an extra pottery class. Mom signed her up before she finished the sentence. In our house, the rules were as flexible or rigid as needed depending on which daughter you were. When Bella broke something, Mom would kneel beside her, rubbing her shoulders, saying things like, "Sweetheart, you're expressing big feelings. Nothing is ruined. It's okay." When Bella screamed or slammed a door, Dad would nod sympathetically and call it an emotional release. When Bella refused chores, Mom would whisper, "She's overwhelmed. Let her breathe." But if I ever slipped even slightly out of line, the reaction was a lecture disguised as a diagnosis. The one time I tossed an empty soda can into the wrong recycling bin because I was rushing to catch a ride, Dad stopped me in the hallway like I'd shattered a window. This shows a lack of respect for our shared space. Maya, why are you being careless? If I ever rolled my eyes, Mom would gasp dramatically and say, "Do you see how hurtful you're being? Do you understand what you're doing to this family?" The irony was almost comedic. These were therapists who encouraged other families to embrace honesty and home as a safe place. Yet I learned early to shrink, to stay quiet, to take whatever narrative they handed me. Even our bedrooms were symbols of the unspoken hierarchy. Bella had a beautifully curated space, soft lights, pale curtains, a lock on her door, signs that said, "Creative Sanctuary and no entry without permission." Mom made it clear, Bella's room was her sacred haven. No one entered unless Bella agreed. My room, on the other hand, doubled as a storage area. Holiday decorations lived in my closet. Boxes of old books sat under my desk. Sometimes the vacuum cleaner parked in my doorway for days. And Bella, she wandered in and out of my room whenever she felt like it. Usually barefoot, usually humming loudly, sometimes picking up my things and moving them without asking. If I protested, Dad would tilt his head and say in that calm therapist tone, "Maya, are you projecting jealousy onto your sister? You know she struggles with boundaries." Every time I tried to defend myself, every time I tried to say, "Hey, this isn't fair," I was met with a script my parents had long perfected. Dad would cross his arms and say, "Let's unpack why you're acting defensive." Mom would tear up instantly. She cried with theatrical precision and whisper, "You're hurting me. Why do you always make me feel like such a bad mother?" And there it was. The guilt, the manipulation, the emotional sleight of hand that made any complaint I raised fold back onto me like origami twisted into the shape of self-blame. Over the years, I learned something important, not about them, but about survival. I learned that in some families, silence isn't a lack of voice, it's armor. I became good at school. I did my chores without comment. I took part-time jobs as soon as I was old enough. I saved my money. I did not ask for the drone kit or the coding camp or the new laptop or even the basic respect Bella received automatically, because I knew the answer would either be no or worse. A lecture about how I should be grateful for the supportive home I lived in. So I adapted. I kept my head down. I let them believe the story they wanted. Bella, the sensitive star. Maya, the strong one who didn't need anything. But inside, I felt something growing, something quiet, steady, unshakable. A knowledge that one day I'd have to make a choice. Continue playing the role they wrote for me, or start writing one of my own. School became the only place where I could breathe without feeling watched, measured, or compared. I used to walk the hallways with my headphones half on, half off, just enough to mute the world but still hear if someone called my name. One afternoon, after yet another morning of filming Bella's ballet routine for my parents' Facebook page, I wandered past the flyers outside the math wing and saw it. Coding Club, after school, room 214. I hesitated, remembering Dad's flat rejection when I'd asked about robotics. But something in me itched quiet, stubborn, familiar. I went. Room 214 smelled like old whiteboard markers and warm computers. Kids huddled around mismatched chairs, typing furiously, laughing over bugs only they understood. And at the center of it all was Miss Elena Alvarez, the math teacher with the sharp bob, bright scarves, and the kind of eyes that saw straight through people. The first time she leaned over my shoulder to look at the puzzle I was working on, she frowned not critically, but thoughtfully. "You see patterns most kids don't," she said, tapping the screen gently. "You're not guessing. You're tracing." No one had ever spoken about my mind that way. Not even close. I started staying after school almost every day. I loved the club, loved the logic, the puzzles, the way code didn't care who the golden child was. In room 214, the rules were different. Talent mattered. Effort mattered. I mattered. Miss Alvarez, without prying, started noticing things. The way I never wanted to go home early. The way I flinched when someone raised their voice. The way I shut down whenever anyone mentioned parents. One day, when the club ended and everyone filtered out, she sat beside me. "You remind me of myself when I was your age," she said. I barely knew what that meant until she added quietly, "I grew up with a narcissistic mother. Emotional abuse is still abuse. Maya, even when it's dressed up in gentle words." My throat tightened. No one had ever named it before. At home, everything I felt was dismissed as overreacting. At school, no one asked questions. But Miss Alvarez, she saw it without needing the details. She slipped a thin packet of printed pages into my backpack before I left. "For you, no pressure. Just information." When I got home, I locked myself in my room and read until midnight. It wasn't homework. It was a lifeline. Articles about boundaries, about the dynamics of scapegoat and golden child, about children raised in families that were perfect in public, but punishing behind closed doors. And near the back was something I had never heard of: emancipated minor status. A legal path for teens with abusive or neglectful parents to gain independence before turning 18. Not something to jump into lightly, but simply knowing it existed felt like oxygen. Mrs. Alvarez didn't stop there. She quietly mentioned that if things ever became unbearable at home, there were programs that allowed students to live with temporary guardians. She didn't push me. She never said leave. She just showed me that staying wasn't the only option. A few months later, she recommended me for a part-time job at the community center. It was nothing glamorous, just supervising the computer lab for younger kids, fixing basic issues, keeping an eye on sign-ins, but it paid a little. And better yet, it was mine. My parents barely noticed. They assumed I wanted extracurriculars for college applications and that the job was cute, something practical Maya would do. They didn't know it became the first place where I felt like I had agency. I'd sit in that tiny lab with mismatched keyboards and humming fans and watch little kids learn how to type their names. Some days, I helped seniors figure out how to email their grandchildren. Other days, I fixed broken printers or created simple sign-up forms. It was mundane and magical at the same time because for the first time, I wasn't just the daughter who held the camera or the sister who got out of the way. I was someone other people relied on. Then, during spring break, the center wanted to digitize their chaotic scheduling system. They joked about needing an app, and the idea rooted itself in my brain. I worked on it every night after homework, tiny pieces of code that grew into something almost useful. When I showed Miss Alvarez, she didn't pat me on the head or say good job. Sweetheart, she asked if I wanted to refine it, improve it, submit it to a youth tech initiative she knew. I did, and to my shock, a small nonprofit that partnered with local community programs reached out. They liked my prototype rough as it was and asked if I planned to pursue computer science. They offered, informally, to set aside a small scholarship if I applied to certain programs. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was a door my parents had never opened for me. That's when I started keeping my own records. It wasn't out of rebellion. It was survival instinct. I created a private folder on an old thumb drive: my grades, recommendation emails, paperwork from the community center job, screenshots of my project, and every message from the nonprofit. At the time, I didn't understand why I felt the need to separate my achievements from my parents' grasp. I just knew that if anything ever happened, if Bella needed another spotlight, if my parents wanted to twist another narrative, if blame needed to be shifted, I wanted proof that I existed outside of their story. That little folder would later become the anchor of an entirely new life. And in hindsight, maybe Mrs. Alvarez knew that from the beginning, that every child in a house like mine needs two things: the knowledge that they're not crazy and the knowledge that they have options. She didn't rescue me. She did something far more powerful. She handed me the tools to rescue myself. That Tuesday afternoon is burned into my memory with a kind of sharpness that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. I was 17, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor with my laptop balanced on a stack of textbooks, headphones on, the soft clicking of keys filling the silence. My room was dim except for the glow of my screen. I'd spent weeks building a video portfolio for a competitive tech scholarship, my shot at proving I wasn't just the practical daughter who held everything together, but someone with real talent, real ambition, real potential. The demo app I'd designed for the community center was the centerpiece of my submission. The deadline was the next day at 11. 9 p. I had one night to finalize the transitions, polish the code snippets I wanted to showcase, and export everything into one cohesive file. For once, I felt proud, nervous, but proud. Like maybe the work I'd done quietly in corners and computer labs might actually matter to someone beyond myself. And then my door slammed open. Bella never knocked. She burst in like a starlet entering a stage she believed she owned. Her phone was in her hand, screen already lit, ring light from the hallway reflecting in her eyes. "I need your laptop," she announced. not even glancing at what I was doing. I have to upload a TikTok tonight. Mom wants it live before the center's workshop post drops. It needs to look professional. I paused my editing. Bella, I can't. My deadline is tomorrow. This is for a scholarship. She rolled her eyes dramatically. It'll take 5 minutes. Maya, stop being difficult. I pulled in a breath. Steady but firm. No, if anything gets deleted or corrupted, I lose the whole thing. You have your own laptop, and your iPad, and the MacBook Mom keeps in her office. Bella blinked at me like I'd suddenly spoken another language. Those aren't good enough. I need this one. The color grading looks better on yours. And I need to finish my project. I said, tonight. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. God, you're such a robot. You don't care about anything except coding. You never help with family stuff. I'm the one doing real work for Mom and Dad. You're just in your own little world. That one struck a nerve I didn't know was raw. For years, I'd been the one folding laundry, cleaning, babysitting Bella, doing whatever needed to be done. But because Bella painted sunsets and filmed artsy videos with soft piano music in the background, because my parents used those clips to market the creative environment of their family therapy center, Bella's work looked more valuable, more emotional, more worthy of attention. Still, I stayed calm. Bella, this laptop is mine, not shared. I bought it with my own paychecks. And I am working. You can't just take it. Her expression changed, sharpened, like she wasn't used to me saying no, like she wasn't sure how to respond when her role as the center of our household wasn't being catered to. Something ugly flickered in her eyes. Then she lunged. Before I could even react, she grabbed the edge of my laptop, yanking it toward her. My headphones ripped off my head. I reached instinctively to take it back, but she was already tapping, swiping, her thumb hitting keys and trackpad with chaotic speed. Bella, stop! But it was too late. With a few reckless movements, my project folder disappeared from the desktop. I froze for a second, convinced it couldn't be real. Maybe she just minimized it. Maybe she moved it accidentally. Then I saw the trash bin icon flash. What did you just do? My voice cracked in disbelief. Bella looked at the screen carelessly, then shrugged. Oops, oops. My throat tightened. Bella, you just deleted my work. She didn't allow me to finish. She lifted her phone, turned the camera on herself, and in an instant, she was live streaming. Guys, look, she said, fake laughter spilling out. My sister is freaking out again. She's grabbing me. I wasn't grabbing her. I reached for my laptop, trying to stop her from pressing more buttons. The stream caught only a blur of motion, my hand near her arm. Bella's dramatic gasp. It lasted maybe 5 seconds before she ended the live, but 5 seconds was enough. Enough for people to see a version of reality she curated. Enough for her to craft a story where she was the trembling, innocent artist and I was the unhinged one ruining her creativity. I snatched the laptop back, heart pounding as I pulled up the directories. The folder containing my demo gone. The draft video corrupted. The raw clips I hadn't backed up yet missing. The external hard drive with older backups, sitting in my locker at the community center. My stomach dropped. You deleted everything. My voice was barely a whisper. Bella folded her arms, as if she were the wounded party. You're being dramatic. Just redo it. It took me weeks, and I have deadlines too. Your TikTok isn't a deadline, I said, shaking. This is a scholarship. This could change my future. Oh my God. Maya, stop acting like you're the only one with a future, she snapped. You're hurting my ears. Then she tried to push past me, toward the door, muttering something about needing better lighting. When I blocked her path, she shoved me hard. I slipped on the rug, falling sideways into the corner of my desk. Pain shot through my elbow as my skin scraped against the wood. Bella, I gasped. She didn't flinch. Instead, she whipped her phone back out, hit record, and staged her moment like an actress hitting her mark. She staggered backward dramatically, letting herself drop into a half-fall that looked convincing if you didn't know her. Then she screamed, You hurt me. Maya, you're hurting me. I'm recording this. She aimed the camera straight at my face. capturing the moment my hand reached out not to hit her, but to steady myself. She angled it so it looked like I was grabbing her. Her breathing became shaky and loud, the kind she used when she wanted sympathy. Already, I could imagine how she'd show it to Mom and Dad, out of context, cut to pieces, transformed into evidence of my supposed aggression. For a split second, I just stood there, stunned. Not because I hadn't seen this manipulative performance before, oh, I had, but because something inside me cracked wide open. Something that had stayed silent for years. Something that whispered, "This is the moment everything changes." And it was because that video, the lie wrapped in shakiness and false tears, would be the spark that burned down the whole house of cards my parents had spent years constructing. But back then, in that bedroom filled with the glow of a shattered project and a sister's triumphant smirk, all I could feel was the weight of loss of work, of chances, of the last thin thread holding me to the idea that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. They wouldn't, not in that house, not with those people. And soon, I'd realize I wasn't the one who needed fixing. I was the one who needed to get out. Bella didn't wait a single second. The moment she finished her performance in my bedroom, she bolted down the stairs with her phone in hand, already sniffling dramatically. I followed more slowly, clutching my scraped elbow, my mind still spinning from the shock of watching my hard work vanish in an instant. By the time I reached the landing, I could already hear the familiar cadence of her victim voice, fragile, trembling, calculated. When I stepped into the living room, Bella was standing between my parents like a wounded lamb, holding her phone up for them to watch. I didn't even need to see the screen to know what she'd cut together. It was only a few seconds long, the part where my hand closed around her wrist as I pulled the laptop back. The part where I stepped toward her. The part she could twist into danger. Everything else, the shove, the deleted project, the live stream. The way she'd lunged for my laptop without warning was gone, trimmed out with surgical precision. Mom gasped loudly, hand over her mouth. "Oh my God. Maya, what is this?" Dad's face hardened into that cold professional mask he used during difficult consultations at the clinic. He turned to me with grave disappointment dripping from every syllable. "We need to talk about your aggression, Maya." Agresión. That word hit harder than the fall against my desk. Dad didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His authority came from tone, posture, clinical vocabulary. The same tools he used to manage vulnerable families who trusted him. He pointed toward the living room, toward the sofa where countless clients had sat for restorative sessions. Today, I was the patient. The problem. Bella curled herself into Mom's side, whimpering softly. And with that, the stage was set. They positioned me in the armchair across from them like they were preparing for a formal intervention. Dad paced slowly in front of me, fingertips pressed together, eyes narrowed and deep. Full concern. Mom sat beside Bella, stroking her hair with the kind of tenderness I'd never seen directed at me unless a camera was involved. I took a breath and tried to explain. Everything. Bella grabbing my laptop, her deleting my project files, the scholarship deadline, the live stream, the shove that sent me into the desk. I told them the truth as calmly as I could, but they didn't hear any of it. They weren't listening. They were waiting for the moment they could fold my words back into their prefabricated narrative. Dad raised his hand, interrupting me mid-sentence. "Maya, you are rationalizing violent behavior by shifting responsibility onto your sister. That is a classic defensive posture." "No," I said, my voice rising just slightly. "I'm telling you what actually happened. Bella deleted my work. She pushed me first. And now you're catastrophizing." He cut in again. "You are inflating normal sibling conflict into persecution to avoid accountability." I felt my pulse in my throat. "I'm not inflating anything. She literally shoved me." Mom let out a choked sob at that. "I can't believe you would talk that way after everything we've done for you. We dedicate our lives to helping families heal. Maya, do you know how it feels to hear you tearing our family apart? Do you know how much you're hurting me right now?" There it was. The classic emotional pivot. The tears. The implication that I, not Bella, Not the situation was the knife slicing through our perfect household image. Dad stopped pacing. He sat across from me, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. "Here is what is going to happen," he said, sliding into the firm, authoritative tone he used to finalize decisions with clients. "You will apologize to your sister for physical aggression and emotional intimidation." My jaw tightened. "I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do." "You will also sign a family reconciliation agreement," he continued, ignoring my response. He pulled a printed packet from a drawer and set it on the coffee table. "This documents your acknowledgement of your anger issues and your commitment to undergo therapeutic intervention at Restored Hearts." It took me a moment to fully process the words. Anger issues, intervention, therapy sessions billed under my name. A sick feeling coiled in my gut. I recognized the form not specifically, but structurally. A consent paper, authorization for treatment, documentation insurance companies required for ongoing billing. They wanted me to sign away my version of reality, my dignity, and my future to justify a narrative where I was the problem and they were the solution. "So you can bill insurance for treating me?" I asked quietly. Mom inhaled sharply, offended. "How dare you imply we would exploit you? This is about healing. You need help." "Maya." "No," I said, my voice steady and low. "This is about control." Dad's eyes flashed a small, sharp warning. "If you refuse to participate in this reconciliation process, then you are choosing to be non-compliant, and consequences follow non-compliance." I said nothing. Silence can be its own form of rebellion. He straightened, shoulders squared. "Then you're suspended from this home." The room stilled. Even Bella lifted her head in surprise. Dad continued, clinical and calm. "You will not use the kitchen, the living room, or any shared spaces. You will not use the Wi-Fi. You will not use the car. You will surrender your phone." He extended his hand. "You may only leave the house to go to school or work. These restrictions remain until you apologize and sign the agreement." The words hit me one by one, each like a small stone tossed into deep water. No shared spaces, no internet, no transportation, no communication, until I submitted. Bella watched me with the faintest smirk, as if she thought she'd won some unspoken war between us. My parents stared, waiting for me to crack the way they expected me to, waiting for tears, rage, pleading, but something in me had gone still, cold, clear, done. I looked at them, at the home that had never actually been mine, and I heard myself say the softest, most obedient-sounding words imaginable. "All right." Mom exhaled shakily in relief. Dad nodded, satisfied. Bella leaned back against the couch, triumphant. They all believed I'd break within a day or two, crawl back, beg for forgiveness, fold myself back into the role they'd carved for me. They didn't understand what those two words really meant. They didn't understand that in that moment, something inside me stopped belonging to them. "All right," I repeated silently in my head. "All right. Then I won't stay." That night, the house felt different, colder, emptier, like it already knew I didn't belong there anymore. I sat in my dark bedroom with the curtains drawn, the only light coming from the thin line beneath my door. My parents had confiscated my phone and cut the Wi-Fi, and the silence pressed against me like a weight. It wasn't new, but it felt sharper now, more final. I wasn't crying. I thought I might, but instead I felt a steady stillness in my chest, as if the day's chaos had burned away every last drop of fear. It was the kind of clarity people talk about right before they walk away from a fire when the heat stops mattering, because you finally understand it will never stop burning you. Outside my door, footsteps padded lightly down the hallway. Then Bella's voice, soft, fragile, theatrical, the same tone she used in her videos when she wanted to be adored. "Mom, it really hurt," she whispered. She grabbed my wrist so hard. "Look, it's already turning purple." It wasn't. I knew it wasn't. I'd seen her wrist when she ran downstairs earlier, nothing but smooth, unmarked skin. But Bella's talent had always been spinning ordinary moments into tragedies, where she played the heroine or the victim, depending on which role won her more praise. Mom clucked sympathetically. Sweetheart, you are so brave. Your sister is struggling, and you're bearing the weight of it. You didn't deserve what she did. I closed my eyes. Brave. For deleting my work. For lying to our parents. For shoving me into a desk hard enough to scrape skin. Bella sniffed dramatically. Dad said he'll get her under control. He said she has to sign that paper or she can't stay here. It's for her own good. Mom sighed deeply. The way she did when she wanted to sound wise and wounded at the same time. Your father knows what he's doing. This family needs harmony. Maya needs structure. You did nothing wrong, honey. Their voices faded as they moved toward Bella's room. But the words stayed. They didn't just believe Bella's version of events, they needed to believe it. It gave them a clean, symmetrical narrative they could present to the world. Bella, the sensitive daughter harmed by her sister's emotional volatility, and Maya, the troubled teen in need of intervention from her therapist parents. A perfect storyline for their brand. A perfect justification for the treatment sessions they wanted to bill. I thought about the packet Dad had pushed toward me. Family Reconciliation Agreement. It was never about reconciliation. It was about paperwork, documentation, insurance-friendly language. If I signed it, they would have everything they needed legal consent to treat me at their center, to diagnose me, to bill under my name, all while controlling me through a narrative they wrote. And if I stayed silent long enough, they'd keep using my social security number just like they already had. That thought sent a ripple of cold through me, because I suddenly remembered something I'd seen months earlier. A stack of papers in Dad's office, claim forms, lists of completed sessions, my name appearing again and again under minor client, with dates and codes I didn't understand at the time. I got up slowly, opened my closet, and knelt beside the cardboard box where I kept the few things that truly belonged to me. I pulled out my old external hard drive, the one with incomplete backups of my project, but still mine. Then the folder with all the documents I'd started collecting. My grades, scholarship emails, job contracts, printed messages from the nonprofit, recommendation letters, proof that I had a life outside their curated family narrative. And then, with my hands trembling just slightly, I took out the photocopies I'd stolen from Dad's office weeks ago. I hadn't meant to. They'd been mixed in with some insurance brochures I picked up to help with a school project. But when I saw my name on those forms documenting therapy sessions I had never attended, I kept them. At the time, it was just confusion and a little fear. Now, it felt like revelation. If I signed that agreement, they could do it again. If I stayed silent, they'd continue shaping me into whatever story made them look righteous. If I stayed at all, they would rewrite my future until it fit neatly inside their business model. I sat back on my heels, breathing slowly, letting the truth settle. I couldn't stay here. Not another day, not another night, not another moment being sculpted into someone I wasn't. I reached under my bed and pulled out the old, half-broken laptop I'd kept hidden, the one my parents thought had died 2 years ago. It still worked if you held the charger just right. I powered it on, waited for the dim screen to flicker to life, and opened my email. My hands didn't shake when I typed the message. They didn't shake when I hit send. If I needed a place to stay for a while, would your offer still stand? I didn't write anything else. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. Miss Alvarez would understand. She always did. The reply came at 11:47 p.m. Yes, get your documents. We'll talk tomorrow. And that was it. The final spark. The door unlocking in my mind. I moved quickly after that, quiet, measured, efficient. I grabbed my backpack and filled it with the essentials. Documents, the hard drive, a few clothes, my work uniform, the little notebook where I wrote down ideas for future projects. I looked around the room one last time, memorizing nothing. It had never been mine anyway. Then I walked to the kitchen, tore a sheet from the notepad Mom kept next to the grocery list, and wrote one sentence in thick, steady ink. Gone. Don't look for me. I left it on the counter. At 5. Sraria. The house still slept. Bella had her door shut, no doubt dreaming of the sympathy she'd receive tomorrow. My parents were silent behind their bedroom walls, confident I'd break any minute now, but I didn't break. I opened the front door, stepped into the pale morning air, and didn't look back. I walked to the nearest bus stop with nothing but a backpack and a fragile, determined hope. I boarded the bus to the apartment complex where Missy Alvarez lived, watching the sun rise over a city that, for the first time in my life, felt big enough for me. I wasn't running away. I was stepping into my own life for the very first time. Miss Alvarez opened her apartment door before I even knocked twice. She was barefoot, still in her pajamas, hair slightly messy as if she'd been lying awake waiting for me. Without a word, she wrapped me in the kind of hug that didn't demand anything back. Then she stepped aside and let me in. Her apartment was small, barely a living room, a kitchenette, and a single bedroom, but it felt warmer than the house I had lived in for 17 years. She pointed to the sofa. "That's yours for now," she said gently. "We'll figure the rest out." I didn't sleep much that night, maybe 2 hours. Tangled in a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender, my mind kept replaying the image of my backpack on her floor, the note I'd left on the counter, the silence of dawn as I slipped out of my old life. But beneath all that noise was a steady, growing certainty. I had done the right thing. I wasn't safe in that house. Not emotionally, not legally. And now, for the first time, I had a chance to build something different. The next morning, after a hurried breakfast of toast and fruit, Alvarez drove me to a legal aid office downtown. The building smelled like paper and stale coffee. But inside one of the small conference rooms was a lawyer named Mr. Haynes, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, ink-stained sleeves, and more empathy than I thought someone in his profession was allowed to show. He listened truly, listened as I explained everything. My parents' intervention, the suspended from home punishment, the deleted project, the therapy claim forms I'd found, how my parents presented emotional manipulation as family healing. He took meticulous notes, asking questions only to clarify, never to challenge. When I slid the stack of copied insurance claims across the table, his eyebrows rose. "This is significant," he murmured, flipping through the pages. "Sessions billed under your name, multiple dates, diagnostic codes." He glanced at me. "And you never attended any of these?" "Not one," I said. He hummed in thought. "And these other names? These are kids from your community center." "Yes, my friends. Some of them don't even know my parents well. They certainly never went to the clinic." He exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. "This isn't just negligence. This is patterned insurance fraud." He leaned back, folding his hands. "Maya, you were right to leave." The relief that washed through me felt like oxygen. He outlined my options carefully, without pressure. Because I was 17, almost 18, he said I had grounds to file for emancipation. Between my part-time job, my savings, my academic record, and the documented evidence of my parents' misuse of my identity, the case was unusually strong. "Your teacher," he nodded toward Mrs. Alvarez, "can also petition to become your temporary guardian until you turn 18. Courts often prefer that arrangement when the minor already has a stable relationship with the adult." The idea of emancipation felt surreal. Me, a kid who had slept on the living room sofa of someone else's apartment less than 12 hours ago, standing on the brink of legal independence. But I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to ruin my parents. I just wanted freedom, safety, a life not built on lies. When Mr. Haynes suggested we file anonymous reports with the insurance company and the State Therapy Ethics Board, I hesitated. I didn't want to be the one dragging them through the mud. I didn't want to be used against them the way they had used me. He must have seen the conflict on my face, because he softened his voice. "Maya, this isn't about hurting them. This is about stopping something illegal before it hurts anyone else, including you." I swallowed, nodding slowly. "Just don't involve me directly. Not yet. I want to be free, not the face of a scandal." He nodded. "We can do that." The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, hearings, signatures, and cautious hope. And then it happened. A judge granted me temporary emancipation, allowing Miss Alvarez to act as my guardian until I turned 18. The ruling came with strict orders. My parents were forbidden from contacting me outside approved channels. They were not to appear at my school, my job, or the community center. For the first time in my life, I was legally out of their reach. The next year became a kind of rebirth. I enrolled in a night program to finish high school early. During the day, I returned to the community center job grateful for something stable, something familiar. But then, Mr. Haynes connected me to a small insurance company that needed part-time IT support. It sounded intimidating at first, but the hiring manager saw my code samples, my app prototype, my grades, and took a chance on me. I didn't realize then that the job would change everything. The insurance office was nothing like Restored Hearts. People weren't posturing for social media or crafting perfect narratives. They were dealing with data, systems, anomalies. I learned how claim audits worked, the flags that triggered investigations, the ways fraud was detected. I learned about CPT codes, diagnostic codes, coverage patterns, required documentation, the logic trees that algorithms use to spot suspicious billing. It was like discovering a language I was born to speak, and with every new skill I learned, a thought curled deeper inside me, quiet but undeniable. One day, the knowledge I was gaining here would circle back to the house I had left behind, not because I wanted revenge, but because truth has weight, and lies eventually collapse under it. I didn't know how or when, but as I walked home from work each night, watching streetlights flicker across wet pavement, I felt something inside me growing stronger, a spine where there had once been silence, a voice where there had once been fear, an identity not defined by my parents, or Bella, or any story crafted to sell the illusion of a perfect family. I was building a life from zero, brick by brick, and soon, that life would be stronger than anything they had ever built. Time has a strange way of softening some memories and sharpening others. The months after my emancipation went by quietly, almost peacefully, like the world was giving me room to breathe after holding its hand over my mouth for so long. I focused on work, finished high school through the night program, and took online courses in cybersecurity and compliance, devouring everything I could. My life felt small but steady, and for once, the stability was mine. But while I rebuilt myself brick by brick, the world I had left behind began to crumble. I didn't hear it directly, of course. My parents were blocked on every platform, their numbers filtered straight to spam. Their attempts to reach me funneled into a legal abyss they couldn't cross without violating the court order. But gossip travels in waves through second cousins, old neighbors, parents of former classmates. The whispers reached me in fragments. Restored Hearts is being audited. Insurance flagged some irregular billing. They're asking for documentation for therapy sessions Maya supposedly attended. At first, I pushed the thoughts away. I didn't want to linger on their problems. I didn't want to feel responsible. But some things refuse to be ignored, especially when they echo the very patterns I'd discovered in Dad's office. From what I pieced together, the insurance company began asking for detailed notes, signatures, and attendance logs not just for me, but for other clients as well. When documentation didn't match, payments were delayed. When inconsistencies piled up, an audit was triggered. And while my parents tried to keep it quiet, the cracks started showing. They tried everything to reach me. Emails from Mom filled the spam folder in my legal inbox. Long, tear-streaked paragraphs about family bonds and misunderstood intentions. Dad sent shorter, clipped messages filled with phrases like, "We need to discuss this as adults, and your cooperation is necessary." They contacted my former friends, my old teachers, even sent letters to my former school, unaware I no longer attended daytime classes. When none of that worked, they turned to the oldest tool in their kit: image management. On Facebook, Mom posted carefully curated statuses about children who abandoned their families, daughters manipulated by outsiders, and the heartbreak of losing someone you raised with love. Dad posted vague quotes about forgiveness and estrangement fueled by lies. They wrote as though I were some rebellious teen gone astray, not the child they'd tried to turn into a billable diagnosis. Their friends commented with prayer emojis and sympathetic platitudes. People who had never met me offered advice about wayward daughters. I saw screenshots occasionally. My reaction surprised even me. I wasn't angry, just tired. Their narrative had never included me as a full human being. I shouldn't have expected it to start now. While they spiraled publicly, my own life moved forward. I worked my part-time IT support job, saving everything I could. I took online classes late into the night, fascinated by every lecture about data privacy, fraud detection, ethical hacking, compliance procedures. I tried not to think about my parents, and for a long time, I succeeded. Until the day I turned 19, I was at my desk in the insurance office, sipping burnt coffee and debugging a login error for a senior claims investigator, when my supervisor walked in with a folder under his arm. He wasn't smiling. He was never the type. But his expression was curious, almost cautious. "Maya," he said, "I need to bring you into something sensitive." I set my coffee down. "Okay. We've been authorized to open a deeper investigation into a therapy center with a long pattern of questionable claims. The inconsistencies span several years. Some underage clients, multiple diagnoses that don't match treatment logs, significant red flags." He slid the folder toward me. The clinic's name on the tab made my stomach drop. Restored Hearts Family Center. I stared at the words for a long moment, unable to move, unable to breathe. Of all the companies in the entire state, of all the claims that could have landed on our desks, it had to be theirs. My supervisor misread my stillness as confusion. "It's a sizable case. We'll need extra eyes on data formatting and pattern analysis. You've been great with our anomaly detection tools, so we'd like you on the team." I swallowed hard. My hands felt numb. "I can't." He blinked. "Sorry. I can't be involved. That's my parents' clinic." The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. He studied me for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Thank you for telling me. That's important." He took the folder back, sliding it under his arm. "We'll reassign you to another branch for the duration of the investigation." Relief and dread tangled in my chest. I wasn't relieved for my parents. I didn't have the energy for that anymore. I was relieved for myself, for staying out of something that could swallow me whole emotionally, even if I had the knowledge to help. As he reached the door, he paused. "When the time comes, the investigators may request personal testimony from anyone whose name appears in historic claims. You're not obligated, but if you ever want to speak on the record, your insight would be valuable." I nodded, though I couldn't trust my voice. After he left, I sat alone at my desk, staring at the blank screen in front of me. I hadn't started the investigation. I hadn't pushed for it. I had asked, begged, prayed to be left out of anything that tied me to them. Yet the truth had a way of circling back. My escape, my silence, my refusal to sign their paperwork, it hadn't saved them. Their own years of manipulation, dishonesty, and fraudulent practices had finally caught up to them. For the first time since leaving that house, I felt the ground shift. Not in fear, not in guilt, but in recognition. This was only the beginning. The letter arrived on a Thursday afternoon, folded so neatly inside my mailbox that for a moment I thought it was just another piece of school mail or a bill from one of my online courses. But when I saw the seal of the state licensing board stamped across the top, my pulse thudded once, then again, harder. I sat on the steps outside my apartment, the envelope trembling between my fingers as I slid a thumb under the flap. Inside was a formal notice requesting my presence at a hearing. They were investigating a series of therapy sessions billed under my name by Restored Hearts Family Center. The letter listed dates, long lists of dates spanning months before and months after I left home. Sessions I had never attended. Diagnoses I'd never received. Plans of care I had never agreed to. At the bottom, in bold, it said, "We ask that you provide clarification and any information that may assist in determining the accuracy of these records." For a long moment, everything around me blurred. The traffic, the distant dog barking, the neighbor yelling at her kid to put on shoes, it all fell away. I was 17 again, staring at those photocopied forms in my bedroom the night I packed my backpack and left. I remembered the thin ache in my chest when I realized my parents had used my information to bill services without my knowledge. And then I remembered someone else, Mr. Haynes, leaning back in his chair, tapping the paperwork I had given him. I packed those documents in your file. Maya, we'll report anonymously. You won't be involved unless you choose to be. I had assumed naively that he'd waited, that maybe he'd held on to the documents, stored them for possible future use, or kept them in my case file until I turned 18. The truth hit me slowly, in pieces, and then all at once. Those documents, the copies I'd taken the night I said, "All right," had been part of the anonymous packet sent to the board and the insurance company almost immediately, not out of revenge, not at my request, but because a legal professional saw a crime happening to a minor and acted. The chain reaction had started the moment I walked out of that house barefoot in the dawn, clutching my backpack. Not when I testified, not when I joined the insurance company, not when rumors of audits spread. It began the night I stopped letting them write my story. I sat there for a long time, letting that realization settle inside me like a shifting tide. I wasn't the villain of their downfall. I wasn't even the architect of it. The truth had simply been too heavy to stay buried. When the hearing date arrived, I dressed in the plainest clothes I owned, black slacks, a simple blouse, and tied my hair back to keep my hands from shaking. I walked into the room as a legal adult now, not the frightened teenager who had once curled at the edges of her bed, terrified of disappointing people who never saw her. The board members sat in a row, reviewing documents as I approached. Their faces were professional, unreadable, but none of them looked at me as though I were a problem, or a liar, or a burden. "Miss Hart," one of them began, "thank you for coming. We need to ask you about the therapy sessions listed under your name." I told them the truth, simply, calmly, without theatrics. I explained that I had never attended any of those sessions. I explained that my parents had billed them anyway. I explained that I had been a minor with no knowledge of the claims. I explained how I found the documents. And when asked, I explained why I left home. A man from the board leaned forward. "And you never consented to being treated by your parents' clinic?" "No," I said. "I never consented. And I was never treated." "Did you sign any agreement authorizing therapy?" "No," I replied. "They tried to force me to, but I refused." That was it. No tears, no shouting, no dramatic accusations, just the truth. The investigation that followed moved faster than anyone expected. Maybe because the evidence was undeniable, maybe because the pattern was clear, or maybe because when a clinic built on family healing is exposed for exploiting children's information, the fall is swift. Both my parents lost their licenses. Their credentials were stripped. Their practice Restored Hearts Family Center was shut down. They were ordered to repay tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent claims. Their case was referred to state authorities for possible criminal charges. Whether those charges moved forward depended on internal thresholds and prosecutorial discretion. But regardless, it didn't matter. The damage was done. The empire they built, the pristine lobby, the pastel brochures, the curated online persona of a perfect healing family collapsed into dust. They had to sell the house. The one they'd told everyone was a testament to honest work and family values. They moved into a cramped, aging duplex with peeling paint and creaking pipes. Dad took a low-paying admin job under a different therapist. Mom worked part-time at a wellness store. And Bella, sweet, delicate, doted-on Bella, was forced into the real world for the first time in her life. Her dream of becoming a full-time artist influencer evaporated when potential employers Googled her name and found her parents' scandal. She bounced between minimum wage jobs, bitter and resentful, blaming the world, the system, and eventually, me. But the truth was simple. I didn't destroy them. Their lies did. I didn't sabotage their practice. They did that long before I was old enough to understand what insurance fraud meant. I didn't drag them into hearings. Their own paperwork dragged them there. I didn't break the family. They were already broken. I simply stepped out of the wreckage instead of pretending it was a home. When the final order came in the mail, official confirmation that their center was shuttered for good, I sat on my couch, held the letter in one hand, and let myself breathe fully for the first time in years. I hadn't looked back since the day I walked out barefoot into the morning. And now, I finally understood. Leaving wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of theirs. The rain that afternoon came down in thin, relentless sheets steady enough to blur the buildings outside my office window into watercolor shapes. I was finishing documentation for a compliance review when the receptionist pinged my desk phone. "There are 3 people asking for you," she said carefully. "They won't give names, but they said it's urgent." I already knew. Some things your body recognizes before your mind catches up: the slight tightening in your chest, the drop in your stomach, the cold prickle along your spine. I stood slowly, smoothing my blazer, preparing myself not for a confrontation but for closure. When I stepped into the small lobby, I almost didn't recognize them. My father, once so polished, so composed, so certain, looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. His shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled. The controlled authority he used to wear like a uniform had evaporated, leaving just a tired, aging man clinging to a version of reality that no longer existed. My mother clutched her purse with white-knuckled hands, eyes swollen, mascara smudged. Her posture was stiff, as if she were holding herself together through sheer force of will. And Bella, my sister, who once floated through life in pastel dresses and curated aesthetics, was wearing a faded cafe uniform. Her hair was pulled back messily, dark rings under her eyes. Bitterness radiated off her like static. We stood there in silence for a long moment, the rain whispering against the windows. Then my father spoke. "We lost everything," he said, voice cracking in a way I had never heard before. "We know you testified. How could you do this to your own family?" It was almost astonishing how quickly he returned to that familiar script: victimhood wrapped in accusation, disappointment disguised as moral authority. But I'd spent years preparing for this moment, building a spine where they once placed guilt. I folded my arms. My voice didn't tremble. "You suspended me from home," I said simply. "You isolated me, took my phone, tried to force me to sign a document saying I had anger issues so you could bill insurance. You tried to rewrite who I was for money and image." I took a step closer, meeting his gaze. "How could you do that to your own child?" My mother broke first. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "We were scared," she said, tears spilling again. "We thought we'd lose our image." We thought. Her breath hitched. "We just needed you to cooperate a little." Cooperate. Stay silent. Play the role. Be the problem so Bella could stay the miracle. Before I could respond, Bella stepped forward, face tight with anger. "You ruined my life," she snapped. "No one hires the daughter of disgraced therapists. Do you even think about what you've done? My future, my career, everything is ruined because of you." Her words hit me like pebbles, not painful, just small, predictable, expected. "I thought about it," I said calmly. "Every time you watched them call me broken so you could stay the favorite. Every single time you stood there quietly while they lied about me, diagnosed me, controlled me. Actions have consequences. Bella, you taught that in your little healing family workshops. Remember?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. My father sank into one of the chairs, rubbing his temples. He looked smaller, deflated. "We made mistakes," he whispered. We know that now. We were desperate. We were trying to keep the center alive, help people, provide for you both." I didn't respond to the excuses. They didn't matter anymore. He lifted his head, eyes pleading. "Come home," he said. "Help us rebuild. We can start over. A new name, a new center. We can do this as a family." The desperation in his voice was real, but so was the manipulation beneath it, an invitation not for healing, but for usefulness. I shook my head. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but I'm not returning to a system that hurt me. I'm not giving you my name. I won't pay your debts. I will not be the foundation for another story you build about yourselves." Mom sobbed harder. Bella looked away. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. Defeated, I walked to the door and held it open. "I hope you all find a way to take responsibility," I said. "Not for me, for yourselves." They shuffled toward the exit, dripping rainwater onto the tile floor. Just before stepping outside, Bella turned back, eyes shining not with sadness but with spite. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I felt no anger, no fear, just clarity. I already regretted staying far too long. I told her, "Leaving is the only thing I don't regret," and I shut the door gently behind them, sealing the past on the other side. A year passed, then another, folding themselves quietly into a life I never imagined I'd have the courage to build. By the time I turned 26, the girl who once slipped out of her parents' house at dawn with a backpack and a shaking heart felt like someone I remembered from a very long distance, a version of myself I carried with gratitude, not fear. My career grew faster than I expected. The part-time IT support job that had introduced me to compliance work became the foundation of something bigger. I moved into a full-time role with a nationwide insurance organization, and not long after that, I was promoted into the digital compliance tech team. Now I help develop fraud detection tools specifically for behavioral health and mental wellness services, an irony that isn't lost on me. Some days, when I look at the dashboards we design, I think about how different things might have been if someone like me had been in that job years earlier, spotting the patterns before they swallowed me whole. But I don't stay stuck in those thoughts. I use them. With Mince Alvarez, still one of the most important people in my life, we started an online support group, a small corner of the internet where kids and adults who once were the scapegoats of their families gather to share resources, how to set boundaries, how to understand basic legal protections, how to build financial independence even when your own home feels unsafe. We don't fix people's families. That was never the goal. We simply help them fix the part of themselves they were trained to ignore. My own life is quiet, but full in a way that makes sense to me. I rent a small apartment with large windows and warm amber lighting in the evenings. Plants line the sill. My desk is cluttered with books on forensic auditing and digital ethics. And there's always a laptop warming the corner of the dining table. I have friends, real ones who know my history without using it against me. Sometimes we cook together. Sometimes we work late into the night on our laptops. Sometimes we just sit in silence because safety doesn't always need noise. And I'm seeing someone, a gentle, grounded person who listens more than he speaks. Someone who never makes me feel like my past is baggage he's being forced to carry. We split everything: time, space, conversations with a kind of ease that still surprises me. I used to think love would feel like walking on glass, desperate not to say the wrong thing. Now it feels like coming home without needing to lower my voice at the door. As for my family, I hear bits and pieces. A text from a distant cousin, a message from an old neighbor, a whispered update from someone who used to attend Restored Hearts before it closed. My parents are still working low-pay jobs. Their licenses were never reinstated. The house they once bragged about is long gone. They bounce between side gigs and part-time shifts, always one step behind their own bills. And Bella, she blames everything her job, her stalled dreams. The shadows of her parents fall on circumstances she refuses to name honestly. She carries bitterness the way she once carried praise, openly, hungrily, constantly seeking more. None of them have my phone number. None have my address. The email they once used to reach out is inactive. They no longer have access to any version of me they can reshape. Sometimes people ask if I regret the outcome, if I regret testifying, if I regret stepping away, if I regret watching the end of a family built on polished lies and curated narratives. And I tell them the truth. My family didn't fall apart because I left. They fell apart because what they built never had real walls, just wallpaper. I didn't destroy them. Their lies did. I simply stopped standing in front of the wreckage pretending it was a home. Because the day I said, "All right," wasn't the day I betrayed my family. It was the day I stopped betraying myself. It was the day I recognized that staying in a place that required me to shrink to fit their story was a slow kind of dying, and leaving was the first breath of living. So now, as I close this chapter, I want to turn to you, the one listening right now. Maybe you've felt the sting of being suspended. Not literally, but emotionally. Maybe your family wrote a role for you that never fit. Maybe they told you who you were because it served them, not because it was true. If your own home demanded you play the problem so they could play the hero, would you have the courage to say, "All right," and walk away? Or would you stay until pieces of you disappeared? And before we go deeper into the next story, tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? And have you ever been suspended from your own family in a way no one else could see?